In Search of Great Stories presents
D-R-A-M-A drop.
Spoil the hell out of this movie.
What happened to the tow truck, Winston?
There's a lot of meta here. Let's get to watching great movies.
Welcome to Movie Lover 22.
Get over here. I saw The Substance, and it was pretty good. Not my favorite, especially not my favorite weird movie. It's not the best movie of the year, either horror or otherwise, like people like to say about nearly every movie that comes out. I gotta say, I'm not much of a body horror guy, but this one really tried to go the distance. I am glad I saw it in theaters. I would probably have not watched it on streaming or bought it just because it's one of those movies that I was interested in, but just wouldn't have had the initiative to watch it if I missed the theater run. Now, this film wasn't even on my radar. I kept seeing ads for it, kept seeing Dennis Quaid and Demi and Margaret Qualley. It must have been at least twice a day. And when you see this kind of constant advertising assault for a movie, chances are it's Dune or Star Wars or some other property with epic status that Hollywood is begging you to go see, because the tastemakers in American culture will lose their minds if the hive mind of shitty pop culture doesn't follow through. However, I saw a few reviews for The Substance on Letterboxd and was surprised that it had such a high rating, with a number of reviews saying how weird it is. And since I'm a weird guy that likes weird movies, I grabbed a friend and we got tickets. The Substance completely surprised me. I like to go in knowing as little as possible and letting the movie tell me what it is as it's happening. Also, I will be spoiling this movie, so if you don't want spoilers, then listen to someone else's show. I am very anti-spoiler, but if we're going to talk about a movie like this, we're going to say some things we can't take back. Got it? Okay. First things first, here's what I noticed. The movie reminded me of Poor Things in a few ways. As much as I don't want to talk about an entirely different movie during my review of this one, the weird movies of 2024 clamored for my attention. Poor Things had a lot more to say with a similar runtime. The Substance takes its sweet old time hammering in at every turn just how sexist men are in over-the-top nasty ways, which, to be fair, many of the examples are likely drawn from real experiences, but after a few of these examples, you're waiting for the story to hit the next beat. Moments like these are why we don't see characters put gas in their car. The examples given do the job, and it's not required for the audience to understand that these kinds of things keep happening. So having to sit through another one leaves a negative impact on me as a viewer. Poor Things also was a very sexually explorative film in a coming-of-age sense, and The Substance plays like a rebirth-of-age film. And while the protagonist of Poor Things is a very grounded individual, logical, continuously learning and self-improving, the protagonist of this film is entirely self-obsessed, ultimately self-destructive, and never learns anything. Bella, in her own narrative, uses every ounce of wit to carry herself through to the next challenge she faces, whether it's embracing a world of visceral colors and experiences or being shown the horrors of human greed. Ultimately, I felt The Substance lacked the depth that Poor Things delivered. Shocking? Yes. Engaging? Less so. There are some crazy camera angles. Framing Dennis Quaid so he looks like a pigeon in his first scene is unhinged in the most appropriate way, given how nasty his character is. Even more disturbing are the sound effects and extreme close-ups of him eating the shrimp in the following scene. Absolutely nasty, and one of the most eye-twitching scenes in the whole film. Everyone gives a great performance. It made me wonder what the film would have been like if Nick Cage played Dennis Quaid's character. I did not appreciate the overwhelming number of callbacks at every possible moment. It felt as if the film didn't trust me to remember what it had already told me half an hour ago. The visual effects also were incredible, reminiscent of Society, and would probably have had similar effects if Society was made today. Hearing the audience burst into shocked laughter as the film showed us how absurd it wanted to be as we reached the finale was truly an experience, and I'm glad I saw it in theaters just for that. Other films with body horror are admittedly more satisfying, without going even half the distance. Not body horror quite to the same degree, but The Neon Demon shares themes of unrealistic female beauty standards, and, to me, far more enjoyable. Incredible visuals, a solid soundtrack, weird, witchy coven shit, and overall just a great Nicholas Winding Refn film. It can be hard to watch a character latch onto an obsession, and Demi Moore's character latches on fast. She spends a few minutes debating how much she really wants to be younger, more desirable, and what that will do for her current personhood, which is totally fair. I will say, it's very interesting to see that Margaret Qualley's character is an entirely different character with her own wants and needs. The most interesting thing about the film is that the desires of both characters run parallel. They both want to be worshipped and desired, but only by those they want to worship and desire them, the people that can make them rich, the people who make them feel wanted. Interestingly enough, as well, all of these people are men. The people who only want to use them for their sexual assets for their own sexual or financial gain. The women are using men who use them until they can't. Demi is forced out of her own workout show that she's had for decades because her audience is middle-aged women, and so she uses the substance so she can be hot and young again and make more money. But most importantly, be desired. Margaret's character is hired to replace Demi's show, and quickly is the biggest star in America, desired by all. The big asterisk of the film is that they can only be themselves 1 week at a time. See, Demi uses the substance to become the best version of herself, except it's not her. Margaret's character is from Demi, but is her own entity with her own autonomy. So when Demi uses the substance, she goes to kind of sleep for a week, and Margaret wakes up and rules for that week. Then it switches back. Demi is awake for a week, then Margaret wakes up, and it's supposed to switch back. The company that supplied Demi with the substance in the first place gave a very curt warning about not abusing your time. But, of course, someone gets greedy, and Margaret starts taking weeks and months at a time. Oh, also, Margaret builds a secret closet in her condo to store the other body when it's not in use. This by itself is insane, and the audience along for the ride, knowing that it exists, and we just continue on. Very quickly, Margaret is enjoying her fame and being desired as a piece of meat, almost literally, so she extends her week to weeks and months. She has to continuously pull stabilizing fluid from Demi's spinal cord, but when it's used enough without replenishing in her own awake time, the fluid turns from like a transparent cloudy liquid to a distressing opaque dark brown. Demi Moore, as her life force, or whatever you call it, is being used up against her will, her body begins to rapidly decay like she's turning into the Crypt Keeper. She does wake up when Margaret decides Demi needs her own opportunities to live, but the damage is irreversible, and it culminates in some fighting that reminded me of another, much better film about dealing with yourself. That film, too, had some important rules. In the end, Demi is murdered, and in a desperate attempt to still go on without the original sustenance, Margaret injects herself with the substance. And instead of hilarity, such as when Michael Keaton's clone cloned itself in Multiplicity, we get one of the most disturbing monsters in recent movie history, marked with text across the screen. Monstro Eliza Sue, introducing us to the unholy bastardization of Demi and Margaret's characters, Elizabeth and Sue. This deformed, hunchback creature, not quite as what-the-fuck horrifying as the final boss in Alien Romulus, goes to host a televised New Year's Eve event that Margaret was originally slated for. The audience in my theater started to chuckle, But when the audience in the film was so horrified that one person decapitates Eliza Sue, causing another head to grow in its place and spew blood all over the audience, and I mean spew, not a little, a lot, fountains, like Evil Dead. Buckets of blood is too little blood to describe this. At that point, my theater was non-stop laughing at how fucking ridiculous this had gotten. Eventually, after a few coats of negative O, the monster flees, falls in the hallway, and explodes until all that's left is Demi Moore's face. Not her head, just the face. It slithers away until it finds its own forgotten, disgusting star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She melts, only to be cleaned away the next day by a floor cleaner. The Substance is the most shocking movie I've seen since Martyrs. That's not to compare the two. Martyrs is a vastly different film. More than that, other films that claim to be shocking in the last few years are anything but. But I doubt I'll watch The Substance again. It's wild on many counts, and was definitely uncomfortable at times, which it earned honestly and gave it a full-star bump, and it has fantastic practical effects which make it engaging, comical, and stomach-churning. It also contains heavy-handed messaging, a stupid amount of abrasive callbacks, at times too comical of a depiction of absurd events, and its runtime is a hair too long. The Substance, honestly and ironically, didn't contain a whole lot, and I'll revisit other body horror films sooner than this one. 3.5 out of 5. Some of my favorite reviews from Letterboxd. Sophie Holsinger said, "This is what Ozempic is secretly doing to y'all." I Am Mem said, "The things we do for male validation when they can't even wash their hands." Hey, if you had fun listening to this, feel free to leave a review on this show. That would be great. And hey, maybe tell your pals about this show. That would be cool beans too. You can always reach out to me at movielovershow@gmail.com, and you can follow me on Letterboxd at movielovershow. Coming up next, the all-new episode of Pushing Up Daisies.